So as some of you who follow me on Twitter know, I'm a Marine spouse. I've served in the Marines as a spouse of a Marine captain for the last 25 years. And one thing that I've really tried to do with Higher Ground is make sure that we invite the veteran community to hear about other people's stories, but also hear about unique stories about funding their own companies or finding their career or changing careers. Somebody I interviewed was a hospital corpsman in the Navy, but then because of his home lab that he was building, he ended up leading a cybersecurity practice for a major DoD company. So it's always great for me to hear that story. We also, Higher Ground and BSides Las Vegas board voted to at least provide 5 veteran badges so that veterans can come in and experience the BSides community totally, on gratis for the community. I started that program also at Black Hat, so it's really a passion of mine. So when I saw this young man's, and you're young because you're younger than me, proposal about serving in the Navy, but then going through his career and then starting his own company and finding ways to fund it, I figured that this would hit 2 points within the community. People who were interested in starting their own company and also successful veterans going on into a career in cybersecurity. So for no further ado, thank you for your service.
Thank you. All right. So let me just take a look at the time. Can you all hear me okay? Does that need to be closer? All right. Is that a what? All righty. So I'm John. So hopefully you're in the right spot. So we'll be going over a whole bunch of stuff really quick, but I wanted to make sure I gave you all something like tangible to take away. So I'm going to try to fly through this as fast as possible and still leave time for questions. And just to say, I've wanted to use the phrase hack apart since it's so cheesy so many times. Ever since I used to have an email feed for the word hack, and then like 1 out of every 100 is like wife gets angry and hacks apart her husband. So I'm so happy I was able to check that off my bucket list. So first, a little bit about me, because that's kind of the impetus of this talk. As was mentioned before, I was in the Navy, 7 years, had nothing to do with cyber. I was a Korean linguist. I was really shitty at that. I was then a posture linguist, which I was less shitty at, and then moved over into counterterror, so the analysis side, and a little bit of cyber, but no training. I was a German major in college. And so, of course, when I got out during the first sequestration in 2013, I went to the corporate side because they said, hey, what do you know about computers and servers? I said, I speak Pashto. And they said, cool, you're hired. You should definitely come set up people's SIMs. So I did that for a while, learned a lot of good things. Spent about 11 months at a big firm, then moved to a startup. Just quality of life issues, right? Big firms are great, they have good money. Quality of life, work-life balance, not usually the best. So then I went back to I went to the Department of Army, went back to the Gov side, did some freelance stuff, went on the actual offensive side. So by this time I had went and got another bachelor's degree in something computer-ish, that was whatever. But I learned a lot of great stuff when I went back to Army Cyber. Like I said, work in the operations department. So what I kept noticing is I really dug the mission when I was in, right? Because you're not worried about revenue, you're not worried about like the bottom line for dollars, right? You're really focused on the mission. But it doesn't pay terribly great. And in true Army fashion, there was a pay snafu, so after like a year-ish there, I then did some more freelancing and did a startup of my own, and that's where I'm at now. So that's kind of what it feels like day to day. But it's okay, right? Because it's a little bit more fun, and I actually don't work that hard. So going back to why we would want to work for ourselves, right? So I kind of try to focus on like, do I enjoy every day? Like, doesn't mean every day has to be like an amazing, like life-changing day. But there was a guy when I got out of the Navy during like one of the out processing briefs. He had been, I want to say, a pilot in Vietnam. It could have been Korea, but I'm not sure if he was that old. Shot down, prisoner of war, right? It's been a while. But he would always, he was just like super jovial guy, and he would always be like, I never have like any bad days. Like some may not be as good as others, right? But he's like, I never have a bad day. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure after being like stuck in a cage for like months on end, right? It shifts your attitude. And so that's kind of what I set out to do when I spun off into my own company. I noticed like I kind of like didn't care when like customers would call me and like they have some sim that goes down at like midnight and they're like, hey man, we need the server back on. I was like, cool, but that could wait till, you know, like the sun comes up. I don't care. But you can't really tell people you don't care, right? So I was looking for that balance. And so now kind of like the current state of affairs, I feel like the cybersecurity, cyber whatever realm has kind of redefined and reshaped, and then a lot of us kind of blew it. So we said like, yeah, we want all these like super cool perks, and we want to be paid a ton of money, and we want all this really nice stuff, but you can work us to death, right? Like we'll do 80 hours a week, so long as like we feel like we're kind of in charge and like get to be like the coolest kids in the room. And we fell like right into the same trap, right? And that to me is kind of a waste. So I see a lot of people at these conferences, like big conferences, little conferences. I see a lot of people that have a lot to offer that are generally kind of marginalized for one reason or another. And it's generally the bottom line, right? Like the companies we work for generally like are there to make money. So that doesn't lend itself really well to doing stuff outside of the norm and utilizing people's strengths, right? So enough of that. Things could be better. Okay, so in this talk, like I said, I wanted to give you all something tangible, something to take away. So funding sources, my goal is to give you all a strategy where to look, who to talk to for these types of funding sources. I'll say grants a lot in this. It's not really grant money, and I'll show you why it's not really grant money, but for all intents and purposes, it's grant money. All right, so when I wrote this, I was like, let's break down the big picture, and then I realized I'm totally not breaking down the big picture. I am breaking down like the offshoot of one branch of like the big picture, but it's like big picture-esque. So, okay, what I'm gonna focus on are Air Force small business set-asides. This is kind of how it's laid out. So within the DoD, within the government, there are things called SBIRS or SBIRS, right? SBIRS or SBIRS are small business set-asides. It is a pot of money that people, that is given to certain groups, right? Everyone from like NIH to DOE to Air Force, you know, all the service components. Everybody usually has some way to get their hands on SBIR money. SCTRs we're not gonna go into. SCTRs are for non-small businesses, but for people that want to spin off tech from research institutions, right? So from colleges or whatever. So we're going to focus on SBIRS. Small business, need to be under 500 people, can't have a current contract for the tech you're soliciting with that agency. So you couldn't double tap the Air Force, right? If you already had to deal with the Air Force. And US owned for the most part, right? US citizens. Okay. So now under the SBIR umbrella, there are a couple groups, although this is by no means all of them, that are kind of like the tech accelerators, the incubators, whatever, the people that are supposed to go out and kind of like make all the connections. And they've all come up at different times. And so some of them have a lot of overlap, but some of them say they do the same thing, but they do it way differently. So the ones leading it, AFWorks, CyberWorks, I would say maybe now AFRL, which is Research Labs, Wedge is a smaller one, and then Kessel Run is a software. It's kind of a software partnership in Boston with the Air Force where they bring in industry and then they kind of co-locate and solve some of the problems. So if you're looking for what I tend to think of as some of the better ones, we'll focus on these companies. And then the subset of that, of what kind of proposals, like what do their RFPs look like? Open calls, traditionals, I'm not gonna get into the traditionals much, at pitch days. Open calls and pitch days are almost the same thing, except in pitch days there's an in-person component. So I'm not really gonna go into that, just know that what I say applies to pitch days, just put an in-person component. So an open call, right? We're gonna walk you through a proposal for that. Make sure I'm still doing good on time. All right, so an open call. Generally the way these things worked on the traditional side was, hey, we have this problem. We need like a red teaming tool. We need a whatever tool, right? We need like body armor, could be anything. What do you have that can fit that need, or what can you build us, right? And show us that you can build it. An open call is backwards. It says, what do you have that's like super hot in the commercial side, and how can the Air Force use it? Now give us a pitch on that, and we'll give you a bunch of money. So, or it's a bunch of money to me. We'll give you money. I guess bunch is subjective. All right, SBIRS go in phases. Phase 1, customer discovery, feasibility, which is like their catch-all term. They give you money for 3 months, right? It's usually a $50,000 or $75,000 cap. That doesn't mean you have to work full time, right, for 3 months, but it means in the 3 months you need to come out with an Air Force customer that's gonna say, hey, I really dig what they have. I'm willing to do a POC on it, right? And so that leads you to a phase 2. Phase 2, Just think of it as a paid POC. So when I first came across this, I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. Like, who pays for a POC? Well, the Air Force does. And so the rough idea, 12 to 18 months, POC, it's about a $750,000 cap. You can get matching funds, so if people bring in investor money, they'll match it, so you can take $1 million from an investor, you can take and then $750,000 from the Air Force. If there's an Air Force customer that actually wants to do it, because remember, this comes out of Air Force research money, not the customer money. So there's ways so you can actually kind of exponentially grow your money on that. Should wrap up in a year and a half. You can do it for short. Some people do it for 4 to 6 months. It's a paid POC. Phase 3 takes it out of the green money, so out of the R&D money, and it rolls it into a legit GSA sole source contract. The key term there, right, is sole source, right? Not open to other people to bid and snake you on your technology and the work you've done. You will own that for however long you negotiate for. So there's a little bit of work to do, but I will say this is the easiest process. If you've ever been forced to do a GSA RFP proposal, those are the worst ever. This one, the way you start, right, you got to have a small business incorporated somehow. You go through getting a DUNS number, get a cage code, get a SAM stuff. Not important what that is. Start with the SBIRS site I'll give you. It walks you through all of it, right? The leg work to get this is maybe a day tops. The wait time, though, is 6 weeks for the government to process all your stuff. So just keep that in mind. All an open call consists of a 15-slide pitch deck. So if you're already a small company, you're already repping some sort of product, odds are you already have a 15-slide pitch deck. A 5-page tech vol, which is not much of anything. There's a couple of boilerplate things, right? Background, you can expand on the tech if you need to. And a cost vol and some business info. It takes 15 minutes. Phase 2, so for that paid POC, same thing. 15-slide pitch deck, 15-page tech vol in case you really need to break out what you're doing. You need to include statements of work, stuff like that. Again, you're getting paid to do all this. So if you've already gotten to phase 1, that's what you're doing during the phase 1 is writing this. This takes, again, a day. The 100-second video, because I really suck at making videos, is by far the hardest part. And you have to come with a customer MOU, right? You come with an Air Force customer, like I said, that says, hey, this is super cool. We're not going to pay for it, but we'll let you pay us, right, to then run a trial with this stuff. These are the sites, the 2 sites I would recommend. The top one, not to be confused with the other SBIRS site, which I have no idea why the other SBIRS site exists. This is the one you go through. It's the portal for all the stuff. You start to log in here. It walks you through all that other stuff I told you about. The second one is specifically the AppWorks version. It's just more explanation about what they're looking for. Oh, and Twitter. Just follow these groups on Twitter. They all have a huge Twitter presence. All right, community and networks. Okay, 11 minutes. Community and networks. So a big part of why I'm in this now had nothing to do with me going out and knowing about any of this stuff. There's a group called DEF or DEFX. I really don't know if the X is still on there. I don't know how to explain it. They're a group. It's a lot of DoD. It's a lot of ex-military. It's a lot of current military. They don't really back vendors. It's just networking, but it's everybody. It's kind of like the new mafia that wants to replace the old mafia. So they're trying to push out a lot of or get the focus off of the Lockheeds and the Booz Allens, and then be no, we'll do the same thing, but we're cooler and younger. So they've been awesome. They have a Slack channel. It's fantastic. You can go in there. I found tons of customers that way. They're overall just really good people. Okay, so this is my info. I am totally here to help. 10 minutes? All right. I'm totally here to help anyone that wants help. I've done it for a couple of folks so far. It's gone really well. We've got a couple of folks, moving on to phase 2s now. Totally for free. I have no problem doing that. The only thing that I always thought was the unspoken rule was please don't be an asshole. If you're just a really shitty salesperson and can't make your quota and think I'm going to help you beef up your numbers, I'm not going to do that. And please don't call me at midnight to talk work. I will totally talk to you at midnight, but not about work. So that's my info. Like I said, if you want to talk more about it and actually write one together, these things are super quick. And in fact, after this evening at 6 to 7, there will be a couple people from the DEF group that I'm just going out and meeting up and having drinks with. We'll be at, is it Pub 365? Is that the name? The spot that's here. So just look for the yellow hat and feel free to come over. We can talk shop.
Right after this?
No, 6 to 7. So I'll just be hanging around down there. It's not anything formal at all. Okay, so I want to make sure I get the questions in case there are any, but I can talk ad nauseam about this. So there's a whole bunch I didn't cover. Questions? Questions?
To start your own company. So other than this route, what other routes have you examined to find funding? Why did you, being Navy, why did you go after Air Force?
Sure. So everyone has their own brands of SBIRS, right? The Air Force with their open calls, though, made it a lot more attractive to someone like me. They're quick. So a normal SBIR is about 20 pages. It's a white paper with about 10 that you actually have to write. So it takes a little bit longer, right? Maybe a week. But the Air Force came out with this open call. It blew up. The first time there were like 100 of us that applied, and I think like 50 of us got it. The second time there were like 300 that applied. This last round, which was the 4th round, had like 1,600 applied or something crazy. It was huge. So the word is out. What I don't like about it is that now groups, because these are small business set-asides, the Lockheeds, the Boeings and all that, will back companies and be like, oh, hey, no, we're not here. We're just helping them. But they'll make all the connections and take a piece. And then you get a bunch of the same old in there. Well, I'd kind of rather see some more diversity. The Navy is starting to do this. They tried to put out a version. I'm not really sure what it was. It showed me this really shady page that I really didn't want to enter my info in. And it was on Facebook. And I was like, And then Army is starting to do really good stuff. They opened up an Austin office for AAL, Army Advanced Labs, I think. They're doing something like this where you essentially do like a quick page of like, here's a pitch, and then they will contact you if interested and work you through the same process because they have all the same authorities. But yeah, Navy is still a little bit further behind. I will say I'm not sure if they know how to quite do this. The nice thing about this is that if anyone's ever worked a normal GSA contract, it takes months to like a year to get awarded. From my submission time to the time I went under contract was like 2 weeks, which is unheard of. Like that just doesn't happen. So they're really moving fast on this stuff. And they now have hundreds of companies in there doing this stuff. And the whole thing is like it's okay to fail. Like they're totally expecting to toss out 1,000 solutions and like 900 will not make it. That's okay because they tried. They gave the money out there. If there was a need, it should have been met. You would hope, right? The link has been made. And so they're okay with having 100 really great solutions if 900 fail. So
in the military, one of the things that I have heard people really like is that if you fail, they'll give you feedback. Did they give you feedback as to why you weren't accepted?
They do. So you can petition for feedback, although the Air Force now just like packages it in. And it's usually something along the lines of, commercialization wasn't strong. You have to show that you have a commercial route for this. Sometimes I'll get really random feedback and you have to go back and be like, are you sure this is the right person? They're like, oh, sorry. Sometimes they just have too many good proposals, right? We've been on plenty of lists being like, hey, you were number like 101 out of 100. Sorry, like apply next time. Maybe we'll like it more. So, but you do get feedback, which is really good because the more you submit, the way better odds you have of winning.
Can you wait for that microphone?
Have you encountered any processes that are open to non-U.S. citizens or U.S.-owned companies?
So this one in limited fashion is, but there are caveats, right? You either have to have like a U.S. partner or something like that. I haven't seen any that have been totally funded through the DoD by non-U.S. groups. However, groups like the deaf community, I always feel so weird saying that. They have on their Slack, they have people from all over the world that come to these conferences and like just to network. I've seen people do work with them from outside. So like one was like the Swedish Army, something that was totally random, but it was this really nice journal that came in and they're like this big, right? So they're able to work really easily with small companies. So I've seen more through there, but not through US DoD. I don't know of any. That's all right.
Is there any better preference for selection? If not, is there from the funding aspect for outside funding?
So, sure. So you said, are there any preferences for selection criteria?
For veterans, yeah.
Oh, for veterans. So there are spots where they will. So the question is kind of, are there like special selection categories that would influence, right, the selection of your company or their awards? So yes and no. It is not like a GSA where a certain portion has to go to, service disabled, veteran owned, women owned, the whole SDVO, whatever. However, there's like a checkbox when you go through the portal that asks you for those. So I'm assuming it is factored in somewhere, but it is not as transparent or as widely used, I think, as like a GSA one. Yep, all based. So did I have to come up with any additional funding to kind of run away this whole thing? No. So I started submitting when I was still with my old company. Super long story there. They were okay with it. But yeah, so I just started writing these up on the weekends. I'd like grab a 6-pack and type up some proposals. And when I started winning, I was like, hey guys, it's time for me to move on. But that's how I rolled into it. Because once you're in, phase ones would be a little hard to live off of, right? If you're divvying up maybe like 40K, but 750,000, I was able to make that go a pretty far distance, right? So yeah, once you're in it, and then yeah, it just snowballs after that, right? I've won multiple ones. You've got that pressure off you. So yeah, no additional backing up to this point.
Awesome. Thanks, John, for
Thank you.